Daenerys Targaryen's footfalls echoed like thunder in the great hall of the Red Keep, her silver-white hair stirring with each determined stride. She had come far, farther than most men or women in living memory had ever dared to dream. But with the Iron Throne in sight at last, she felt the brush of ghosts behind her. The countless souls who had believed in her, fought for her, died for her. The day's light was waning, the tall windows of the hall casting long shadows over the intricately tiled floor. Her dragons circled in the sky outside, invisible now in the deepening dusk, but she could still feel them bound to her by invisible threads. They had carried her across the sea. They had burned a path forward. They had been, in many ways, the harbingers of her fury and her hope. Now, the hush that filled the Red Keep reminded Daenerys that the real battles were sometimes waged without a single flaming breath or the clash of steel. She knew what she planned to do, and that it would be unlike any conquest she had undertaken before. There were no chains to break on a legion of slaves in King's Landing, those she had already freed or frightened away. There were no armies to crush beneath her might. Those who opposed her had bent the knee or perished in the fires of her dragons. What remained was subtler, more insidious. The labyrinth of secrets woven through the kingdom's very heart. It was a tapestry of whispers and lies, all of it carefully sewn by the one man who had sat so quietly at her side for many moons. She had summoned Varys, the master of whisperers, to meet her in private. But that was not entirely accurate. She had not so much summoned him as demanded his immediate presence. Even as she ordered a guard to fetch him, her eyes had flickered, uncertain for a breath's span, recalling the gentleness in his voice when he'd first pledged his counsel and secrets to her in Meereen. He'd been indispensable, or so Tyrion had insisted. And indeed, Varys had proven invaluable through the campaign in Slaver's Bay, in forging alliances, in preventing betrayals before they ever fully hatched. She had considered him a friend, or at least as much a friend as a queen might keep in a man so skilled in deception. Yet it was his face that wore the mask of sincerity, his eyes that had always seemed haunted by unspoken truths. Now she was about to unearth them all. She paused in the great hall, turning toward the grand doors that led deeper into the Red Keep's corridors. The painted table that had once served Stannis Baratheon and, before him, Aegon the Conqueror's line, stood in a chamber not far away. She envisioned it for a moment, recalling the times she'd studied it in Dragonstone. How the realm's shape would curve under her hands, the mountains and rivers like veins beneath the wooden surface. But that was only a map. Maps never told the full story, nor did they contain the souls who whispered and conspired across thousands of leagues. Varys did. Rather, Varys's network did, the little birds he joked about, or perhaps did not joke about, children across the 7 kingdoms who spoke in innocent tongues and carried dangerous truths. She had never realized the scope of his spy network until she was here, in King's Landing, standing at the threshold of the throne she had sought all her life. A muffled sound behind her caused Daenerys to turn. Grey Worm approached, unsmiling as ever, in the company of 2 Unsullied who held Varys by the arms. The spider, to his credit, did not seem cowed. He stood with his back as straight as an old man could manage, his richly embroidered robes only slightly disheveled from the hands that had guided him. His expression was contemplative, eyes sliding from the Unsullied at his side to the sight of Daenerys waiting in the dying light. "Your Grace," he said softly. Daenerys raised a hand in silent command. Grey Worm and the others let go of Varys, then withdrew a short distance. Their spears were at their sides, glinting faintly. She allowed the hush to linger, letting him feel the uncertainty of her silence. The air was thick with unspoken accusations. "You sent for me," Varys prompted. He folded his hands over his stomach, as though they were about to engage in a polite conversation about the day's meals. "Yes," she replied, "but perhaps I ought to say I called you here to account for yourself." Her tone was mild, but Varys was no fool. A flicker of fear or caution gleamed in his eyes. "I have always accounted for my actions, Your Grace." Daenerys took a slow breath. She thought of the rumors swirling in the city, that the spider had many webs. Some said those webs were unraveling under the new queen. Others said they had grown tighter, more cunning. You have served me since Meereen. You helped bring me to Westeros. Yet I sense there are secrets you keep about your little birds. Varys's lips curved slightly. They were little birds before you were born, Your Grace. I inherited some. I cultivated others. They serve the realm as I do. Do they serve the realm, or do they serve you? Daenerys asked softly. I have heard stories that you feed them, shelter them, but also keep them close through fear. Children who have nowhere else to go. He inclined his head gravely. They trust me, because I have earned that trust. I protect them from those who would harm them. She stared at him, letting her gaze bore into his soul as she struggled to keep the anger from her voice. She remembered being sold to Khal Drogo, powerless, frightened, wishing for a champion. I know the feeling of being used, she said. I will not abide such cruelty in my reign. If you have enslaved these children to gather your secrets, he was quick to interrupt. It is not slavery, I assure you. They come to me because I feed them, clothe them, and because I do not hurt them. That is more than most have ever offered them in this cruel world. Daenerys narrowed her eyes. But you hold them in your power. Their secrets become your currency, and in turn you shape the course of events. Isn't that the same argument every slaver has made since the dawn of time? That they provide food and shelter for their property. A flicker of shock crossed Varys's face. They are not property, and I will not be compared to a slave master, not after. He caught himself, pressing his lips thin. Daenerys saw the pain in his eyes, the old torment. He had told her once, in a rare moment, about his own mutilation by a sorcerer's hand. But she did not relent. You will show me these children, and if they have been wronged, I will give them the choice to leave or stay. They will belong to no one. He swallowed. These children are not kept in dungeons or chains, I promise you. But you must understand. Many of them can't read, can't work. Some have been forced into the darkest corners of this city. If you free them, what will become of them? Daenerys's voice was firm. Then I shall see to their well-being. I who have freed thousands from bondage shall not quake at the notion of caring for children. She lifted her chin, recalling the faces of the freedmen in Yunkai, in Astapor, in Meereen. My mind is set. Varys exhaled slowly. As you wish, Your Grace. They will follow you if that is what you demand. But beware of what it is you do. My little birds are the eyes and ears that might save your reign. If you scatter them, you risk losing those secrets forever. She regarded him quietly for a moment. You once told me you served the good of the realm first, and then me. If you truly believe that, you will accept this. Lead me to them. It was not until she uttered the command that Varys's shoulders seemed to sag. He looked away from her eyes, silent. Finally, he nodded. I will take you to some of them, but be warned. They are scattered, hidden in places you cannot imagine. Daenerys felt a faint pang, a sense of stepping over a threshold. She turned to Grey Worm and the Unsullied. Protect him, but ensure he does not slip away. Then she waved her hand. Take me to the little birds. It was night by the time Varys led Daenerys and her guards through the twisting corridors of the Red Keep, then deeper still into the bowels beneath the city. They ventured into secret passageways rumored to have been built by King Maegor the Cruel, cunning tunnels that had swallowed up entire armies or let them pass through walls unseen. The air grew stale and thick, and the torchlight made shadows dance on the ancient stones. Now and then, Grey Worm's face flickered with caution, scanning for hidden threats. But the only danger came from the illusions cast by the torch's flickering flame. Finally, they found a winding staircase. Even Daenerys, who thought she knew the Red Keep's labyrinth well enough now, realized she was venturing into unknown territory. The steps spiraled downward, each footfall echoing as though they were descending into some darker realm. Varys remained silent, his expression curiously resigned. At last, they reached a set of heavy wooden doors. Varys unlocked them with a small key from his robes, then pushed one door ajar. A stale draft swept out, carrying with it the scent of mold and old water. The corridor beyond was more modest, lined with a few small rooms that might once have been used for storage or for guards. Daenerys saw a flicker of movement at the end of the corridor. By the time she stepped closer, she beheld half a dozen pairs of eyes peering through the dimness. Children of varying ages, dressed in rags and torn cloaks, each one with a face etched by caution. Some looked as young as 5 or 6, others were perhaps 12 or 13. They seemed poised to bolt at the first sign of threat, though 1 or 2 recognized Varys and tentatively crept forward. "They're frightened," Varys said, his voice hushed. "I have tried to keep them from harm. Many of them were street orphans or wards who fled homes that were worse than no home at all. They gather information, sometimes by overhearing, sometimes by blending into the surroundings. People forget children are there, or they underestimate them. Thus the secrets they glean." Daenerys raised her torch, its glow illuminating the young faces. She saw hunger carved into their cheeks. "You have done more than gather secrets," she observed, seeing blankets, small piles of old bread. "You've tried to feed them, but they are still hidden away in these tunnels." Varys's voice was quiet. Openly sheltering such children in the keep might draw questions, even from allies. "And the streets are not safe. Down here, at least, they are under my protection." Daenerys approached the group slowly, crouching to meet the eyes of a girl who couldn't be more than 8. The child's hair was tangled, her small hands trembling. "What is your name?" Daenerys asked softly. The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "Lara, your grace." Daenerys smiled gently, mindful of how fear could grip a child's heart. "Hello, Lara. I promise you, no one will harm you here. I am Daenerys Targaryen, and I have come to make sure you are safe." One of the older boys narrowed his eyes, glancing between Daenerys and Varys. "We've heard of you," he said, a mixture of awe and doubt. "They say you burn those who cross you." Daenerys felt a pang. Even in this warren of frightened children, the darker rumors of her conquest had found their way. "I do not wish to burn anyone who does not seek to harm me or those under my protection. I came here because I want to help you. Varys says he takes care of you, but I see only these cramped quarters. I will give you better places to live, and teachers and food, and a chance to choose your own fate." The children exchanged uncertain glances. One small boy tugged at the hem of Varys's robe. She's a queen?" Varys nodded. "She is, and a powerful one." Daenerys did not rise, choosing instead to keep her posture low. "I know many of you have overheard secrets for Varys, sometimes in dangerous places. This is no longer an order for you. If you wish to continue such tasks, you may, but it must be your choice. If you do not wish to, no one will force you. You will be free." A hush lingered among the children. Some of their faces showed hope. Others reflected simple confusion, free to do what? They knew no trades, had little education. Some of the older ones might fear returning to the city streets and the cruelty that lurked there. Daenerys understood that freedom meant not just the removal of chains or the end of forced labor. It meant the opportunity to build a life. And that was not accomplished merely by a queen's word. It took time and resources and compassion, all of which she intended to provide. Varys studied her carefully. "Your grace, you intend to relocate them? Provide them with some path forward? That will cost coin and manpower." Daenerys stood slowly. "I intend to see that these children do not suffer. If I can pay for ships and armies, I can pay for schools or at least for warm beds. Their loyalty will be freely given or not at all. That is my decree." She turned to Grey Worm and gestured. "Send word to Missandei. Have her arrange rooms in the keep for the children. I will instruct the kitchens to provide meals, and gather the city's best healers. Some of these children look ill." Grey Worm bowed stiffly. He gave Varys a measured look, then departed with one of his men to carry out her orders. Varys let out a soft sigh that Daenerys could not interpret. Was it relief, resignation, or something else? "There are more of them, Your Grace, not just in these tunnels. Some are scattered throughout King's Landing. Others are in Old Town, Lannisport, Gulltown, nearly every major port and city." She met his gaze with calm determination. Then I will find them all, however long it takes." He inclined his head. "As you say, Your Grace." But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of regret or acceptance, that hinted he might already know what was coming. The realm's tapestry of secrets, once pinned in place by his cunning and the children's endless ears, was about to be torn asunder. Yet he did not protest further. It was not an immediate process. In the days and weeks that followed, Daenerys' retinue fanned out throughout King's Landing with the help of Varys, who guided them to the safe houses, hidden crypts, and undercrofts that housed his little birds. Some had taken shelter in the blackened remains of the dragon pit, scrounging for rats and pigeons. Others lived in abandoned workshops. A few even haunted the lower levels of the September of Baelor's ruins. Daenerys, accompanied often by Missandei or Tyrion, personally oversaw their relocation. The city's underbelly teemed with children who had long ago learned to blend in, and though many were frightened to be discovered, many more viewed Daenerys with a cautious sense of awe. As the children were brought into the Red Keep, Daenerys arranged temporary quarters for them, doubling up in the old servants' dormitories and the storerooms that had once held royal provisions. She invited midwives, priests, and even a handful of traveling mummers to entertain them. Soon the Red Keep, once draped in the gloom of war and conquest, rang with the voices of children at play, laughter echoing off ancient stone walls. Tyrion joked that the entire fortress had been turned into a nursery, which vexed the lords of Westeros vying for the queen's ear. But Daenerys was resolute. Throughout this process, something extraordinary began to happen. The children, freed from fear and want, started talking, not just to Daenerys but to her advisors, to each other. They traded bits of knowledge gleaned from the corners of the city and beyond. Whispers about the remains of Cersei's hidden treasury, about gold caches rumored to be in certain houses. Rumors regarding certain lords in the Reach who might be plotting to depose Daenerys if the time was right. Details of Sellsword companies hired in Essos that might still land on Westeros' shores if the pay was right. It was as though, in giving the children kindness and safety, Daenerys had unlocked a flood of information more valuable than any store of gold. Varys watched all this with guarded fascination. He found himself both relieved that the children were being cared for and uneasy that his carefully tended webs were unraveling beyond his control. These were not secrets trickling in through him anymore. They were being shared freely, often unpredictably. The spider was losing his grip, and though he tried to reconcile this change with the part of himself that wanted to serve the realm, he couldn't deny the pang of envy that welled in him. He had built this network over years, forging alliances of silence with children who had nowhere else to go. Now Daenerys, simply by offering freedom and comfort, seemed to command their loyalty more firmly than he ever had. The Queen's next decree was that the children who wished to continue gathering information should do so openly, as messengers, pages, scribes in training, provided they had the aptitude and the will. Those who wanted no part of such work were free to learn a trade, or to train in arms if they were old enough. She asked only that they share whatever knowledge they gained that might affect the peace and prosperity of the realm. Those who had lived on the city's streets often knew of hidden unrest in the back alleys, the nest of criminals that might be plotting a resurgence, or the secret dealings of certain merchants. Every day, Daenerys took reports, not just from the lords and ladies who flocked to her court, but from these once-forgotten children. Many times, the children's accounts proved the more accurate. Within a month, the effects reverberated across King's Landing. The small folk realized that the new queen was harboring orphans and training them, feeding them, protecting them. Word spread. Those who had once feared a foreign usurper on Dragonback began to see her as something else. A liberator, not just of slaves across the sea, but of the neglected poor in Westeros as well. The petty criminals who had once prowled Flea Bottom found their safe havens disrupted by roving gangs of children loyal to the queen, eyes as keen as cats. These young watchers reported wrongdoing directly to Daenerys' guards, leading to arrests and the dismantling of black markets. For a time, crime in the city dropped as cunning thieves realized there were watchers in every alley. But it was not all immediate success. The city's aristocracy, those who had grown comfortable with the idea that they could bribe or manipulate Varys' birds, discovered these children were no longer so easily bought or intimidated. Some lords objected to the queen's meddling in the affairs of the city's orphans, accusing her of coddling urchins at the expense of the realm's real business. Commerce, alliances, settling the debris left by Cersei's fall. Daenerys, however, saw the big picture. The once disparate rumors, from the Stormlands to the Riverlands, were reaching her without passing through the filter of powerful men. She heard the moans of the peasants taxed by a certain minor lord far beyond their means. She learned of men like Randall Farnell, who had been quietly raising forces in a remote keep on the coast, possibly with designs on undermining her authority. She heard about potential shipping routes that had opened near Dorne, which might bring trade from the Summer Isles if she negotiated properly. In short, by freeing Varys's little birds, Daenerys found herself in possession of an entire tapestry of truths, half-truths, and plausible rumors, enough to shape her reign with knowledge rather than guesswork. Sometimes that knowledge was unwelcome or disturbing. When word came through one of the older children that certain members of her own household were forging secret letters to the Iron Bank, Daenerys had to confront her fragile alliance with Braavosi bankers more directly than anticipated. Other times, the knowledge was oddly personal. Stories of how the city's scullions gossiped about her, or that some of her own newly anointed knights were wagering on when she might name an heir. It was overwhelming, but with Tyrion's help, Daenerys organized the gleanings, verifying as best she could. Varys quietly resigned himself to this new role, no longer the exclusive keeper of secrets, but an advisor who helped interpret them. Daenerys still valued his counsel. After all, he was a master at parsing truth from rumor. Yet a subtle shift had taken place in their relationship. She did not rely on him alone, and so he lost the leverage he had once used to bend kings and queens to his subtle designs. He found himself at times grateful, for it allowed him to rest from the constant burden of weaving webs. And yet, an unease persisted. It was on a windy afternoon, with the city's gulls wheeling overhead and the stench of the Blackwater swirling in the air, that Daenerys stood on the high ramparts of the Red Keep. She rested her hands on the warm stone, gazing out at the sprawl of King's Landing. Smoke curled from chimneys, banners fluttered atop half-ruined towers, and the harbor bustled with ships of all sizes. It could almost appear prosperous, even hopeful, if one did not look too closely at the burnt-out sections near the city's edges, remnants of battle. The scars of war never vanished so quickly. Tyrion stepped up beside her, peering into the distance. The wind tugged at his hair. "Your Grace, you've certainly changed the nature of things here. I almost don't recognize this city anymore." She smiled slightly. "Is that good or bad, I wonder?" He shrugged his small shoulders. "I think it's complicated, as all things are. You've done a remarkable thing, freeing Varys's children from their bondage, offering them opportunities they never would have dreamed of. But there are rumors that some of the lords are growing impatient, feeling neglected while you devote so much attention to the humbler classes." Daenerys inclined her head, thoughtful. "Yes, well, the humbler classes are the majority of the realm. Their loyalty, their well-being matters to me as much as, if not more than, a handful of lords who might cling to old ways." "I don't disagree, but I advise caution. Some of these lords are powerful, Your Grace, and not prone to share your sense of compassion." She exhaled slowly, the wind whipping a stray strand of her silver hair across her cheek. "It seems I can never escape caution. Every day it's something new. The Iron Islands want fewer taxes. The North wants greater autonomy. The Reach wants confirmation of their breadbasket privileges. Dorne wants neutrality from certain crown edicts. I expected ruling to be difficult, but the petty details wear me down more than any war ever did." Tyrion nodded sympathetically. "War is straightforward. We have enemies, we fight them. Governing is a labyrinth of competing desires and ancient grudges. You've broken the wheel, as you said you would, but now you must build something in its place. That is far more challenging." She turned to him. "You've done well helping me manage it, and I have Missandei's steadfast assistance." She paused. "Tyrion, do you think I made a mistake in freeing the little birds? Varys built that network over decades. Now the knowledge is less centralized, perhaps more chaotic. Some days I feel as though I'm trying to listen to every voice in the realm at once." His mismatched eyes studied her for a moment. "Mistake? No, Your Grace. I think you've gained more than you've lost. The realm has never seen a queen who draws her intelligence from the neglected and the vulnerable. It gives you insight into corners that have been dark for centuries. That is valuable beyond measure. True, it's messy, but so is real change. So is real progress." She smiled faintly. "You speak like you've read many books on the subject." A tiny smirk tugged at his lips. "I've read many books on many subjects, and yet none quite covered this. We're in uncharted territory, truly. I hope you're ready for the next steps." Daenerys turned back to the city. "I'll have to be. I didn't come this far to cower before lords in gilded halls. I came to break the chains of oppression. Let them call me what names they will. I am the blood of the dragon." That same afternoon, Daenerys called a gathering of her council in the throne room. The gilded seat of Aegon the Conqueror loomed behind her, the twisted metal arms that once struck fear into any who approached. She sat upon it with surprising ease now, though the steel edges occasionally reminded her of its sharpness, as if the throne itself demanded blood in exchange for rule. In attendance were Tyrion, Varys, Grey Worm, Missandei, and a handful of trusted knights and advisors who had proven their loyalty. Ser Davos Seaworth, newly come to the city to pledge himself to her after learning of the good she had done. When the assembly settled, Daenerys rose. "I have summoned you all because I wish to act on the knowledge we've gained. We have discovered that certain lords in the Stormlands resent my presence here and plot to withhold taxes. More concerning, there are rumors of an alliance forming between some discontented knights and ex-soldiers who served the Lannisters. They intend to gather arms and stir rebellion once the city is stable again. I want these rumors investigated, and if they are credible, I want the leaders brought to justice before they plunge us into another war." Ser Davos nodded gravely. "A wise move, Your Grace, though I'm sure you'd rather not give them the chance to grow stronger. Words travel quickly, but swords more so if we ignore them." Tyrion cleared his throat. "If it pleases you, Your Grace, I can dispatch discreet agents, some of these older children who know the Stormlands well. They can confirm the truth of these claims. Better to have the information verified on the ground before we send the unsullied marching in." Daenerys inclined her head. "Do so, and to the lords in question, issue an invitation to King's Landing. Let them see the changes we've made. If they remain loyal, they will be welcomed at my table. If they still harbor treachery, well, we shall see." Varys stood, his cloak trailing on the floor, and offered a slight bow. "Your Grace, might I suggest including an envoy of these children you've freed? Let them act not just as spies but as ambassadors of goodwill. The Stormlanders might reconsider their grievances if they see you caring for your people beyond the capital." Daenerys studied him. She sensed the complicated feelings swirling in his head. He was, after all, the spider. Yet he had come to her with a genuine idea to leverage the goodwill she was building. "A fair suggestion, Lord Varys. You will organize that. I trust no one knows your former network's pathways better than you." His lips curved in that familiar half-smile. "Of course, Your Grace." That evening, after the meeting concluded, Daenerys remained on the Iron Throne a while longer, watching the twilight shadows creep across the floor. One by one, the torches were lit by the silent Unsullied posted around the hall. She thought back to a time when she had been in Essos, a timid girl at first sold to a call. She had been powerless then, ignorant of the world's cruelty and cunning. Everything had changed. She had walked through fire literally and metaphorically, and emerged the mother of dragons. She had crossed the narrow sea and taken King's Landing. She had liberated hundreds of thousands of slaves. And now she liberated children once pressed into service by the Master of Whisperers. She wondered if she would ever run out of chains to break. The next day, Daenerys found herself crossing the courtyard, where a group of the freed children, mostly older ones in their early teens, were sparring with wooden swords under the watchful eye of one of the Queen's Guard. They wore simple tunics, but their faces gleamed with an intensity that went beyond mere play. These were children who had grown up learning to survive by quick wits alone. Now they were discovering how to wield a blade to protect themselves if needed. A boy named Jaren, with quick reflexes and a crooked grin, bested a slightly taller girl by feinting left and tapping her shoulder from the right. They laughed as they reset their stances. Nearby, a group of younger children huddled around Missandei, who was teaching them their letters. She held a small slate, chalk squeaking as she demonstrated the shapes of the alphabet. Daenerys paused to watch, smiling softly. She remembered her own lessons from her youth, in a grand house far away. If only she had been taught to read and write in a place of kindness, instead of amid fear and exile. But these children would know a better path. Her gaze drifted to Varys, standing by a pillar. He was quietly observing, saying nothing, hands folded. Was he proud, or regretful, or both? As she approached him, the sounds of children's voices rolled through the courtyard. "It's a strange sight, isn't it?" she ventured quietly, coming to stand beside him. Varys nodded, his expression elusive. "I have seen many transformations in my life, Your Grace. This is one of the more remarkable. From frightened urchins in the shadows to, well, children, doing what children should do. Learning, playing, and occasionally fighting as children do." She tilted her head, studying him. "Do you regret losing your network?" He looked at her sidelong, a faint twinkle in his eye that might have been sorrow or wry humor. "I regret nothing that serves the realm. Yet I have always thought knowledge most valuable when wielded with precision. Now, it flows freely through many channels. It has the power to do great good, but also to cause confusion or spark unintended conflicts. The question is, can we harness it effectively?" "I plan to," Daenerys said with quiet conviction. "With Tyrion and your council, and the goodwill of the people. I believe we can." He let out a slow breath. "I hope so. I have served many rulers, Your Grace. Some were better than others. But rarely have I seen one who truly cares for the small folk and the children born in the gutters. If you can maintain that compassion without letting it be drowned by the cynicism of power, you might do what none before you could." She regarded him steadily. "Thank you, Varys. That means a great deal coming from you." He offered a slight bow of his head. "I serve the realm," he repeated softly, as if it were a mantra he'd told himself many times. "And I believe, for now, that you are the realm's best hope." The wind carried the laughter of children to their ears, and for a moment, Daenerys felt more certain of her path than she had in a long time. Yet far from the capital, in the rugged foothills of the Stormlands, news of the Queen's philanthropic gestures did not evoke universal admiration. A gathering of minor lords, knights once sworn to House Baratheon, had formed a quiet alliance they called the Storm's Gavel. Their leader, Lord Harold Selwyck, was a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp green eyes. He had fought for Stannis once, then switched to supporting Cersei when it seemed expedient, and now he found himself under the reign of yet another Targaryen. The notion of kneeling to a dragon queen, especially one who coddled urchins and orphans, grated on him. At a worn table within his hall, he met with a small circle of like-minded men. "We have received word that the Queen is focusing all her attention on worthless brats," Lord Harold spat, tossing aside a letter. "Children she's taken from the tunnels of King's Landing. Meanwhile, the proud families of the Stormlands are left to rebuild on our own. No shipments of grain, no relief for the villages ravaged by the last war. She plays mother to beggars while ignoring her real responsibilities." A gaunt knight named Ser Devron scowled, his thin lips twisting. "Have you heard the rumors? She intends to root out any who would challenge her. Her so-called spies are children. Children who can slip into our households as pages, stable boys, whores bastards. Who would suspect a child?" Lord Harold slammed his fist on the table. "A cunning ploy. Perhaps we underestimated this Targaryen. She's craftier than her father, that's certain. He was mad, but she has guile. And a pair of dragons, from what I've heard." Across from him, another lord, small in stature but crafty, nodded. "We cannot openly rebel yet. The city would muster forces against us in an instant, but we can prepare. build alliances with other disgruntled lords in the Reach, or even beyond. The Iron Islands are always eager to cause trouble if the chance arises. We must not sit idle while the Queen cements her power. Lord Harold stared at the letter once more, resentful. She invites us to King's Landing to pledge our loyalty in person. A mocking invitation. She just wants to keep us under her thumb. I won't kneel to a queen who sees us as an afterthought. We are Stormlanders by the gods. We bend the knee to no tyrant. Ser Devron leaned in. What do you propose, my lord? For a moment, Lord Harold's gaze flickered to the door, as though expecting spies to linger beyond it. We muster our forces quietly. No open banners, no declarations. We hold them in readiness. If she tries to enforce harsh taxes or to flood our lands with these spies, we will strike swiftly and seize Storm's End. Once Storm's End is ours, we can declare open rebellion. The men around the table nodded grimly. They were only half a dozen, but each had allies of their own, knights, sworn swords, the loyalty of peasants who might harbor suspicion toward a queen rumored to bring foreign sellswords. None of them seemed to doubt their cause. Together, they drank a toast to the Storm's gavel, and the chamber filled with the pungent smell of ale. Days later, one of Daenerys's newly freed messengers, a wiry boy named Tommen, rode into King's Landing's gates on a borrowed mule. He wasted no time delivering a coded message to Tyrion. The boy had traveled under the guise of an errand runner, stopping at various villages along the way, but he had used the same cunning sense that once served Varys. He had overheard a conversation in a Stormlands tavern, gleaned some crucial details. The Storm's gavel had begun collecting weaponry and forging alliances. Lord Harold Selwick was at the center. The boy had pieced together enough to realize these men intended to move against Daenerys soon. Tyrion wasted no time hurrying to the Queen's private audience chamber, a vaulted room behind the throne room where she often read or studied maps in the evening. He found her there, Missandei at her side, going over a list of city improvements. She looked up as Tyrion arrived, breathless, short legs moving at a pace that belied his size. "Your Grace," he said without preamble, "I have news from the Stormlands. It seems the rumors of dissatisfaction were accurate. More than that, there is an active conspiracy. They call themselves the Storm's Gavel." Daenerys set aside her parchment and gave him her full attention. "Tell me." Tyrion relayed Tommen's findings. "They're not yet at the stage of open rebellion, but they're gathering men, forging weapons, and reaching out to potential allies in the Reach and perhaps even the Iron Islands. They intend to seize Storm's End if they sense weakness or if you provoke them too openly." Missandei frowned. "Storm's End is no small fortress. If they manage to take it and hold it, they could claim a seat of historical Baratheon power. It might legitimize their cause, drawing others who dislike the idea of Targaryen rule." Daenerys leaned forward, fingers steepled. Her jaw tightened. She recalled her father's history, the Targaryen lineage. Storm's End was indeed a formidable castle, known for withstanding sieges that crumbled other strongholds. "We must not let them seize it, but I have no wish to plunge the realm into another war. These are men who cling to old loyalties, perhaps battered by the conflicts that came before. There must be a way to bring them into the fold without bloodshed." Tyrion nodded. "Indeed, and we might have an advantage. We know of their plans before they've fully materialized. Our intelligence, thanks in no small part to Tommen and the others, gives us the chance to act strategically." Daenerys took a breath, her gaze shifting to the window where the last vestiges of daylight streamed in. "I will call them to King's Landing again, under the pretext of hearing their grievances. But we will be prepared. If they refuse or if we see that they mean to strike, we will counter them swiftly. The question is, how much force do we display up front? If I send an army to the Stormlands, it will confirm their suspicions that I rule with dragons and steel. They might decide they have nothing left to lose." Tyrion considered. "Maybe a middle path. Dispatch a small diplomatic retinue, escorted by some of your new watchers, children from the Stormlands originally, so that they can speak the truth to local villagers, ease tensions. Meanwhile, the Unsullied can remain at the ready, stationed within a day's march." Daenerys's eyes flickered with possibilities. Yes, that might show them I'm willing to talk, but also that I'm not defenseless. It's time we test whether the trust of these children can truly prevent a war. And so it was that a modest royal envoy set out from King's Landing to the Stormlands. Headed by Ser Davos, who had spent time in these lands under Stannis' command, it included a handful of knights, Missandei for her diplomatic skill, and a small group of older teenagers once part of Varys' network, those who knew the terrain and local people intimately. Among them was a girl named Sonya, who had grown up in a fishing village near Weeping Town. She had been forced into Varys' service after her parents died, and she had carried messages between Stormland lords discreetly for years. Now she wore a proud expression, traveling not as a fearful spy but as a free envoy of the crown. The journey took several days, and as they traversed the rolling hills and weather-beaten coasts, the group noted the signs of tension. Peasants eyed them warily, some refusing to speak to the Queen's envoys. Others asked where the Queen's armies were, how many dragons she had, whether the children among them were indeed spies. Missandei, with her calm demeanor and gentle voice, did her best to reassure them that Daenerys only sought peace. She explained how the Queen had taken in orphans in King's Landing, offered them education, purpose. Gradually, some of the small folk warmed to the idea. They had seen enough war to last a lifetime. If the Queen truly cared about them, it might be worth giving her a chance. But the real test came when they reached Selwick's hall. Guards lined the walls, and the banner of a cracked shield flew above the gate. Lord Harald's sigil, rumored to represent his unyielding nature. Ser Davos announced the Queen's desire for a peaceful meeting. They were admitted into the courtyard under close scrutiny, though the presence of only a handful of knights eased the tension somewhat. Sonya noticed men-at-arms gathered in unusual numbers, practicing with spears. The air practically crackled with anticipation. Lord Harald greeted them in the hall, his wide shoulders filling the space, jury, and eyes narrowed. He had set out a sparse feast: bread, salted meat, a thin stew. No sign of courtesy beyond the bare minimum. Missandei introduced herself and their party, speaking clearly and respectfully. "You come bearing tidings from your queen," Harald said in a tone that suggested it was a burden upon him even to hear it. "Yes, my lord," Missandei replied, dipping her head in a polite nod. "Her Grace, Queen Daenerys Targaryen, wishes to ensure the Stormlands are heard in her court. She invites you and the other lords who have any discontent or concerns to present them. She hopes to address them amicably." Ser Devron, who stood to the right of Lord Harald, sneered. "Amicably? A Targaryen queen with dragons who burned her way to the throne? She sits coddling beggars and wants us to believe she cares about the Stormlands." Ser Davos intervened smoothly. "She cares about peace, good Ser. Our realm has suffered enough. The Queen does not wish to crush those who might otherwise be her allies. If you have grievances, taxation, representation, trade, you will find her a willing listener." Harald exhaled noisily. "We want to be left alone to govern ourselves, as Stormlanders have long done. We need no dragon's mercy. The Stormlands never bowed easily to Targaryens in the past, and we won't start now, no matter how many urchins she feeds." Sonya's hands clenched at her sides. She bit her lip, recalling the days she spent cold and hungry, scrounging for scraps before Varys took her in. She remembered how she had dreaded each day, never sure if she'd see the next. It was Daenerys who had broken that cycle, giving her hope and choice. Mustering courage, she stepped forward, mindful that she was just a teenage girl among these armed men. "My lord," she said quietly, "I was born in these lands. My parents fished near Weeping Town. When they died, I had no home. Lord Varys's people found me, put me to work, told me my only value was in secrets I overheard. The Queen changed that. She gave me freedom, an education, and a place of respect. You might scoff at her compassion, but it saved my life. It saved hundreds of lives like mine. And we are Stormlanders, too. Doesn't that matter?" Harald's green eyes flicked to her. He snorted, but beneath his scorn there was a shadow of something more complex. Perhaps he recognized in her stance the echoes of a local child. You serve her will, just as any vassal would. Sonya shook her head. I serve because I choose to. No one forced me to come here to speak these words. The Queen's mercy is real, and her strength is real too. If you push her into a corner, she will defend herself and her throne. But if you come to reason, you'll see this can be a new beginning for the Stormlands. His face twitched, uncertain. Ser Devron, on the other hand, was quicker to reply. Bold words from a child. But we men have our pride and our ancestral rights. We do not yield to a foreign queen simply because she promises bread and shelter for waifs. Missandei's voice was calm, though attention underlaid it. Perhaps, sirs, you would visit King's Landing. Inspect the changes yourself. The Queen has made no demands of you beyond normal feudal obligations, reasonable taxes, respect for the crown, and so on. If that is too high a price for peace, then it must be asked, what would you prefer? Another war? Another wave of bloodshed, ruin, and grief? Before they could respond, a distant horn sounded. The entire hall froze. One of Lord Harold's men hurried inside, face drawn. My lord, he said breathlessly. Riders approach, possibly the Queen's men, or more likely Sellswords. Their banner is unknown to us. They're armed, a fair number. Harold's eyes widened with a mix of alarm and suspicion. I gave no invitation for more visitors. Who are they? Unclear, my lord. They might be mercenaries from across the sea. They're riding under a black banner with a gold serpent. We've never seen it before. Ser Devron cursed under his breath. Have the fools from Essos decided to come early? We're not prepared. Missandei exchanged a sharp look with Ser Davos. The Queen had said nothing about sending additional troops. Tyrion had no knowledge of Sellswords from Essos, at least none that were allied with Daenerys' cause. This was something else. We should gather more information, she began. But Harold was already snapping commands to his men, eyes blazing with suspicion. Form a perimeter. Keep these intruders from getting anywhere near the hall. If they attempt to force their way in, kill them. The courtyard erupted into motion. Missandei, Sonya, and the others found themselves swept up in a building storm of tension. Could these new arrivals be aligned with the storm's gavel, coming to strike at the Queen's envoy? Or were they opportunists, pirates, or some other party come to sow chaos? Ser Davos took a breath. We should ride out to meet them peacefully, see what they want. There's no sense in letting steel speak first. Harold scowled but grudgingly agreed, perhaps not wanting a pitched battle in his own courtyard that he might lose. He led a contingent of armed men, with the Queen's envoy following behind. The gates opened, revealing a group of about 30 mounted Sellswords, or so they appeared, clad in mismatched armor. Their captain was a lean man with scarred cheeks, bearing the black banner with a gold serpent coiled at its center. Harold called out, "Who are you, and what do you want in my lands?" The scarred man gave a thin smile. "We are the company of the Coiled Fang, recently arrived from Lys. We heard there was an opportunity here in the Stormlands. Men who might be looking to hire swords." The hush that followed was palpable. Harold's face became unreadable. Behind him, Ser Devron tensed, as if caught in a lie. There was no use denying it now. The Sellswords had arrived, presumably to strike a deal with the storm's gavel. But they had come too soon, or at least too openly, revealing the secret. Sonya saw Ser Devron's lips part in shock. He had not expected them to appear before negotiations were concluded. Harold's eyes cut to the Queen's envoys. He realized the precariousness of his position. The truth was out. He had planned to hire these men to bolster his rebellion. But the timing was poor, the circumstances humiliating. Missandei and Ser Davos exchanged grim looks. The entire Storm's Gavel plan was laid bare for all to see. The scarred captain seemed to catch on. His gaze flicked between Harold and the Queen's envoys. "Have I come at a bad time? I was told the Stormlands were ripe for a profitable venture." Harold's teeth clenched. "You were told wrongly. Begone before we fill you with arrows." The Sellswords shifted in their saddles. They were outnumbered if Harold's men refused them, but not overwhelmingly so. A confrontation here could be bloody. The captain spat on the ground. We've come a long way. We'd prefer not to leave empty-handed. Perhaps you have gold you'd like to spend, or a fortress that needs some extra defenders. Harold's temper flared, but Ser Davos interceded, raising a hand. There's no need for bloodshed. If you're looking for honest employ, the Queen might be open to negotiations. But not if you come brandishing weapons at her allies. Harold glowered at Davos. I am no ally of your Queen. Indeed, the scarred captain said with a smirk. Yet we were told by a third party, let's say, that you were seeking swords to challenge the Targaryen Queen. Now I see the Queen's envoys in your courtyard. Are we late to the party, or early? Tension coiled like a drawn bowstring. The Storm's gavel men exchanged alarmed glances. Their plan was undone by the unpredictable arrival of these sellswords. Missandei took a half-step forward, speaking in a measured tone. Captain, if you have no existing contract with Lord Harold, you are free to depart. The Queen does not look kindly on sellswords who stir trouble in her realm. The captain laughed. And how would she pay us if we turn cloak and serve her instead? We're not in the business of good deeds. We want gold and gold alone. Harold barked. Enough talk. Turn your horses around and ride away, or we'll turn this entire courtyard red with your blood. A hush followed. For a moment, it seemed the sellswords might indeed will away, but the tension crackled in the air. Then a single arrow whistled from the ramparts, shot by a nervous or overzealous guard. It struck a sellsword's mount in the flank. The horse screamed, rearing and throwing its rider. At once, chaos erupted. Harold's men scrambled. The sellswords drew steel, and the small group of Queen's envoys found themselves in the midst of a sudden melee. Sansa ducked behind Ser Davos, heart pounding. Missandei cried out, trying to calm them, but the clash of steel drowned her words. Harold's men fired arrows from the walls, while the sellswords raised shields or charged forward with war cries. Horses galloped in confusion, some smashing into each other. The captain roared, "Kill them all!" and swung his sword at a guard who stepped in his path. Ser Davos brandished a sword, cursing under his breath. No sense in dying here for a fool's war. We need to get you and Missandei to safety. At the same time, Sansa saw Lord Harold grappling with a sellsword who nearly gutted him. Harold, for all his bluster, could fight well enough, but he was outnumbered. The courtyard was chaos, with men falling from arrow strikes or gashes. Missandei, unarmed, pressed herself against a wall, eyes darting for an escape. Sansa felt a strange clarity then, as if her earlier life as a spy in the Stormlands had prepared her for this moment. She grabbed Missandei's hand. "We have to move now." They raced along the edge of the courtyard, ducking under a half-raised portcullis. Davos blocked a blow that might have struck Missandei from behind, parrying the blade and returning a quick slash that sent the attacker reeling. "Go!" Davos shouted. "I'll cover you." Sansa tugged Missandei into a side corridor. The stone passage echoed with shouts and screams. She heard a clang as the portcullis slammed down behind them. The sellswords inside the courtyard would be trapped, but so too would any chance for peaceful resolution. She ushered Missandei onward until they reached a stable yard behind the hall, where a few terrified horses stamped and whinnied. "We can't leave Davos," Missandei cried. Sansa shook her head. "He'll find a way out. Right now, we need to warn the Queen what's happening here. This is no mere rumor. There's a full rebellion forming, with sellswords from Essos." She hurried to calm one of the horses, a skittish mare. "Can you ride?" Missandei took a shaky breath. "I've ridden enough with the Queen. Let's get out of here." They mounted swiftly, guiding their horses out of the stable yard. One guard saw them and shouted, but Sansa and Missandei spurred their mounts. They galloped out through a small side gate that was partially unmanned, likely due to the chaos in the main courtyard. Hooves thundered as they fled into the gathering twilight, aiming to return to King's Landing. Behind them, the clamor of fighting persisted. Sonya spared one last glance over her shoulder. She prayed Ser Davos would find a way out. She prayed that not all the Stormlanders would be so foolish as to throw their lot in with Harald's rebellion. She prayed that, in the end, the Queen's new promise, that knowledge could be used for good, would not be undone by the old ways of ambition and bloodshed. By the time night fell, Missandei and Sonya had put several miles between themselves and Lord Harald's hall. They rode along a wooded trail, pausing now and again to listen for pursuit. The Sellswords seemed too occupied with the melee to chase them immediately, or perhaps they lacked the knowledge of these hidden tracks. Sonya's memory guided them, as she had often traveled these paths carrying messages for Varys in secret. Now, ironically, she used them to escape the very men who would have once paid gold for her secrets. Under a moonlit sky, they made a small camp by a stream. The horses drank and breathed heavily, exhausted from the fast ride. Missandei rubbed her arms, shivering slightly as the night air cooled. Sonya retrieved a small flint and lit a tiny fire, mindful not to let it grow too bright. They warmed themselves in silence for a moment, hearts still pounding from the day's events. After a time, Missandei spoke, her voice hushed. "We must reach the Queen quickly. This is far more serious than we feared. If Sellswords are indeed flooding into the Stormlands, we could have a full-scale uprising on our hands." Sonya nodded, exhaling shakily. "I know a faster route if we cut across the coastal road. It'll be less traveled, but we have to be cautious of bandits." She paused, glancing at Missandei. "Thank you for trusting me. I was just a child in Varys's network, after all. You didn't need to take my side." Missandei gave a faint smile. "You're free now, and you've chosen to serve the Queen of your own will. That's worth more than any forced service. I trust you more because you have no illusions. You've seen the worst. Yet here you are, risking your life to make things better." Sonya felt tears prick her eyes but forced them back. She couldn't afford weakness. "Not now. Let's get some rest," she said quietly. "At first light, we ride for King's Landing." They banked the fire to embers and wrapped themselves in cloaks. The forest's nocturnal sounds enveloped them, and Sonya listened to the breeze stirring the treetops, the distant hoot of an owl. She remembered how many nights she had spent sleeping in alleyways, or beneath sagging roofs in hidden corners of the city, always fearful of the next day's demands. Now she felt fear of a different kind, the fear that her homeland might descend into war once more. She clung to the hope that Daenerys Targaryen's vision of a free realm might still triumph over this swirl of rebellion. At dawn, they broke camp. The sun rose over the horizon in thin bands of pale gold, illuminating the Stormlands' rolling hills and rugged coastline. Sonya guided Missandei to a narrow path, seldom used by travelers, but it led south along the cliffs before turning inland toward the main road to King's Landing. They rode hard, pushing their mounts to the limit. Every moment that passed was one more moment for the Sellswords to consolidate or for the Storm's gavel to muster reinforcements. The roads were eerily quiet. They passed a few villagers who cast wary looks, but no large parties of armed men. Only once did they glimpse riders in the distance, possibly outriders for Harald. Sonya and Missandei crouched low by a rock outcropping until the riders moved on. At last, on the 5th day, the walls of King's Landing came into view. The city's gates bustled with merchants, travelers, and the ever-present throng of refugees who had drifted there in hopes of finding mercy from the Queen. The guards recognized Missandei and quickly ushered them inside, helping them stable their tired horses. Without pause, they hurried to the Red Keep, where they were greeted by startled attendants. Word spread fast that Missandei had returned, exhausted and grim. Daenerys was in her council chamber, reviewing new building plans with Tyrion, when Missandei and Sonya burst in. Dust streaked Missandei's cheeks, and her hair was disheveled from days on the road. Sonya's cloak was torn at the hem, her boots muddy and worn. "Your Grace," Missandei said, dropping into a quick curtsy despite her fatigue. "We have urgent news." Tyrion's eyes widened. "What happened? Where is Ser Davos?" Missandei explained the events at Selwick's Hall. The sudden arrival of Sellswords, the fight in the courtyard, their narrow escape. It appears Lord Harold has indeed been conspiring, and now that the Sellswords have arrived in force, there's no denying they mean open rebellion. We left Ser Davos behind, but I suspect he may have found another route out or been captured. He told us to flee to warn you. Daenerys' expression darkened, anger flickering. We must save him. If he is in their hands, I will not abandon him. And this rebellion must be crushed before it spreads. I gave them the chance at peaceful resolution, and they spat on it. Tyrion set aside the papers on the table. We should move swiftly. The city's morale is high right now, but if the Stormlands go up in arms, it could rally other malcontents. The Queen's authority must be enforced, but we must also avoid mass bloodshed if we can. Daenerys nodded sharply. I will lead a contingent of Unsullied. We'll march within the week. Let the Storm's gavel see that I do not hide behind these walls. And I will bring my dragons, if need be. She paused, glancing at Sansa. You've done well to come back with this news. You've shown the realm what it means to be truly free, to choose loyalty. I thank you. Sansa bowed her head, heart pounding. I live to serve the realm, your grace, and I owe you everything for rescuing me from a life in darkness. Daenerys placed a reassuring hand on the girl's shoulder. You owe me nothing, but your continued help in the Stormlands might be invaluable. You know the land better than most. Will you join our expedition? Sansa's eyes flicked to Missandei, who offered an encouraging nod. Then the teenager looked at the Queen. Gladly, and so, within days, Daenerys mobilized her forces. The Unsullied marched in disciplined ranks out of King's Landing, accompanied by mounted knights and the freed children who acted as guides and scouts. A sense of purpose bound them together. This was not the savage conquest that had toppled Cersei, but a determined response to a brewing rebellion. The small folk watched them depart with mixed feelings of awe and hope. Some whispered that the Queen brought a new kind of war, one guided by knowledge, not just brute force. Drogon soared overhead, blotting out the sun with his massive wingspan, while Rhaegal and Viserion trailed behind. The sight of 3 dragons riding the sky struck fear into the hearts of any who beheld it, but Daenerys hoped she would not need their fire this time. She wanted to end this rebellion by showing her strength, not unleashing devastation. Word spread quickly through the Stormlands that the Dragon Queen was coming. Some villages closed their gates, others lined the roads to watch the spectacle. Daenerys traveled at the head of her column, astride a white mare, her silver hair spilling over her shoulders. Grey Worm marched at the front of the Unsullied, grim and ready for battle. Tyrion rode in a wagon with the supply lines, his short legs ill-suited to long rides, but his mind sharper than ever. Missandei and Sansa rode together, ensuring the route avoided ambushes or difficult terrain. They advanced steadily toward Selwick's Hall. Along the way, several smaller Stormland lords who heard of the Queen's approach came forth to greet her, some offering tokens of loyalty, others kneeling with trembling voices. They feared the dragons overhead, and they had heard tales of how Daenerys had burned those who opposed her. Yet they also heard how she had freed children and offered bread rather than the sword, how she had listened to the pleas of the small folk. Many decided it was better to bend the knee than risk annihilation. Their pledges bolstered her forces and undercut Harold's potential allies. At last, Daenerys' column drew near Selwick's Hall. Scouts reported that the place was bristling with arms, that Sellswords manned the walls and patrolled the roads. Ser Davos' fate remained unknown. Smoke curled from watchfires, and the black banner of the coiled Fong fluttered alongside Harold's cracked shield. The Storm's gavel had prepared for a siege, or at least for a pitched battle. Daenerys halted her host a short distance away, forming ranks on a grassy slope. She gazed at the fortifications, mind-churning. Tyrion advised negotiating one more time, offering them a chance to surrender. Grey Worm advocated a direct assault. He had no desire to lose more men than necessary. Missandei suggested trying to parley with Harold's soldiers, in case some of them would turn on their lord if promised clemency. In the end, Daenerys decided to make a show of force. Mounting Drogon, she soared into the sky, flanked by Rhaegal and Viserion. The dragon's roars echoed across the land. She circled above the hall, letting them see the reality of her power. If they dared to resist, they would taste dragonfire. She wanted them to know it was an option, but she did not unleash it. Not yet. Instead, she hovered, scanning for signs of Ser Davos or any parley. Below, the Sellswords manned ballistae on the walls. Crude contraptions that might barely scratch a dragon's hide, but they were desperate enough to try. Daenerys hovered out of range, letting them tremble at the threat from above. Finally, the gate creaked open. A figure emerged on horseback, bearing a white cloth on a spear. Lord Harald himself, flanked by a couple of his knights, rode forth to meet the Queen's army. Daenerys landed Drogon on the slope with a thunderous impact. Grey Worm, Tyrion, Missandei, and others formed a protective circle. She dismounted, letting Drogon snarl behind her, a living threat. Harald reined his horse nervously, sweat beading on his brow. "You come to parley?" Daenerys called. Harald's voice shook. "I come to hear your terms." She narrowed her eyes. "Terms? You have raised arms against the crown, hired foreign sellswords, threatened my envoys, likely harmed Ser Davos. My terms are these. Release any prisoners unharmed, disband your sellswords, lay down your arms, and surrender yourself to my justice. Do so, and the small folk here might be spared. Resist, and I burn your hall to the ground." A ripple of fear passed through Harald's face, but his pride flared. "You call it justice, but you are a foreign queen with a foreign army. Why should I yield when my ancestors fought Targaryens for centuries?" Tyrion clicked his tongue. "Because your ancestors are dead, my lord, and you'll join them soon enough if you force our hand. The realm has known enough war. Surrender now, and the queen may show you mercy." Harald's lips curled. "Mercy? From a dragon? I am not so naive." Daenerys raised a hand, staying Drogon's aggression for the moment. "There is no glory in dying for a lost cause, Lord Harald. Think of your men, your people. I do not want to slaughter them, but I will if you leave me no choice." For a long moment, Harald stared at her, jaw clenched. Then he spat on the ground. "I will not bow." He wheeled his horse around, galloping back to the gate. Daenerys watched him, anger and sorrow mingling in her chest. He was a stubborn fool, driven by pride, anger, and old loyalties that no longer served. She felt the same sense of inevitability that had washed over her in Astapor, Meereen, King's Landing. Some people would cling to their cruelty or ambition no matter what mercy she offered. The gates slammed shut. The sellswords on the walls readied their weapons. Daenerys exhaled slowly, then turned to Grey Worm. "Prepare the assault." She glanced to Tyrion, who had a resigned look on his face. "We gave him a chance to surrender." Tyrion nodded, gloom in his eyes. "So we did." Thus began the storming of Selwick's Hall. The Unsullied advanced in tight formation, holding shields aloft against arrows and bolts. The hall's defenders fired desperately from the battlements, but discipline and training told. The sellswords were not as well organized, and many were Stormlanders forced into conscription. Daenerys had the advantage in numbers, skill, and dragons overhead. Stones from catapults battered the walls, but the hall was more of a fortified manor than a true castle like Storm's End, so it did not withstand well. A section of wall collapsed under repeated strikes, and the Unsullied poured through the breach, spears glinting in the sun. Daenerys circled above on Drogon, ensuring no one tried to escape unnoticed. Rhaegal and Viserion flanked the perimeter, their roars echoing across the battlefield. Inside the walls, the battle was swift and brutal. The sellswords, seeing the cause was hopeless, threw down their weapons or fled in terror at the sight of the Unsullied marching relentlessly through the breaches. Some of Lord Harald's loyal knights refused to surrender and died fighting. Others turned cloak at the last moment, kneeling and crying for mercy. Near the main courtyard, Grey Worm's squad came upon a makeshift cell where Ser Davos was being held. He was battered and bruised but alive, grateful to see friendly faces. "Well, this is a relief," he managed to say with a wry grin as Grey Worm freed him. I was beginning to think I'd have to talk my way out of here. Outside, Daenerys landed Drogon in the courtyard. Rubble and smoke filled the air. Corpses lay scattered. She dismounted, stepping through the carnage until she found Lord Harald, pinned under a fallen beam, blood staining his tunic. He coughed, staring up at her with hatred in his eyes. "Dragon Queen," he rasped. "You will ruin this realm with your illusions of freedom and your sheltering of whelps. Better a quick death than—" He broke off in a fit of coughing. Daenerys knelt beside him, ignoring the soot that smeared her knees. "You are beaten. Why did you fight so hard for a losing cause?" He tried to sneer. "Because I will not bow to a queen who sows chaos, who overturns traditions. Your compassion is weakness. This realm was built on order, on a proud lineage. You disrupt it all with your talk of orphans and—" Another cough racked him. Daenerys felt a pang of sorrow, even in her anger. "You fear change. That fear cost you your life and many of your men. I would have spared you if you had bent the knee." Harold's eyes dimmed. "Bend to you? Never." With a final breath, he sagged, the light fading from his gaze. Daenerys sighed, rising to her feet. Smoke curled around her. The sound of battle was dying down, replaced by the moans of the wounded and the crackle of small fires. She turned to see Missandei leading a group of freed children, Sansa among them, carefully guiding captured Sellswords away. Some were just as young as the older teens in Daenerys' retinue. Their eyes, wide with shock, saw not a savage tyrant but a weary, grim-faced queen who had tried to spare them. The next hours were spent securing the hall, tending the wounded, burying the dead. Daenerys ordered any Stormlander who wished to surrender to lay down their arms and pledge loyalty. The Sellswords who had no contracts were given a choice: leave Westeros or swear fealty under strict conditions. Many chose to leave, slinking away into the dark corners of the land. Amid the ruins of Harald's seat, Daenerys convened her advisors. Tyrion, Ser Davos, Missandei, Grey Worm, and Sansa gathered in a half-collapsed hall that once served as a dining chamber. Torches cast dancing light on the grim scene. "It seems we have quelled one threat," Tyrion said, massaging his temple. "But how many more like Harald lurk in the shadows? We can't simply march from one rebellion to another, leaving destruction in our wake." Daenerys looked to Sansa. The girl sat on a broken chair, trembling from exhaustion and the horror she had witnessed. "What do the children's voices say? Are there more plots brewing? Or was this the largest threat in the Stormlands?" Sansa swallowed. "From what I know, Harald was the most aggressive. There might be smaller pockets of discontent, but nothing so organized." "Not now," Ser Davos grunted, one hand pressed to his bruised ribs. "We should root out any leftover Sellswords. The small folk won't soon forget the sight of the Queen's dragons laying waste to a rebel holdfast. Maybe it will deter others." Daenerys looked around at the devastation. "It may deter some, but it will also feed the stories of a dragon queen who uses fire and blood to enforce her rule. I do not relish this, but at times my hand is forced." Missandei touched Daenerys' arm gently. "If we rebuild here, if we show that we are not merely conquerors but protectors, perhaps the people will see your true intentions. We can allocate resources to repair the damage, help the villagers, even appoint a new lord who is loyal to the crown." Daenerys nodded, her gaze wandering over the shattered walls. "Yes, we will rebuild. Appoint someone who has the people's best interests at heart. Let them see that we do not abandon these lands to ruin, and will continue to rely on the knowledge our freed children can provide." She turned to Sansa. "You'll oversee the reestablishment of order here, with Missandei's help, for a time. You know this land, the villages, the children. Let them see one of their own guiding the Queen's hand." Sansa's eyes widened. "Me? But I'm just—" Daenerys stepped forward, placing her hands on Sansa's shoulders. "You are free, and you are wise beyond your years. You know what it is to suffer under the old ways, and you have a heart to see them changed. I trust you. With Missandei by your side, you will do well. I'll leave a small garrison of Unsullied for protection while I move on." A flicker of pride and fear danced in Sonya's eyes. She bowed her head. "If that is your will, your grace, I'll do my utmost to honor it." The queen smiled softly. "My will is that the Stormlands find peace, and that no more children hide in tunnels or fields for fear of lords and kings. If you can help make that vision reality, you will have done more than enough." So it was that Daenerys Targaryen, the mother of dragons, breaker of chains, continued her quest to unite the Seven Kingdoms not merely through fire and blood, but through knowledge, compassion, and the power of free voices. By liberating Varys' little birds, she had gained a mosaic of truths and a host of new allies who owed her nothing but gratitude freely given. The realm's secrets, once hidden in dark corners, were now brought into the light of day. The old order would not give way easily. Pride and tradition would ignite more resistance in days to come. But Daenerys stood firm, resolved that each act of mercy, each child rescued from despair, each rumor turned into an opportunity for healing, would be a step toward a future unbound by the shackles of old tyranny. If dragons were the harbingers of her power, then the freed children, the realm's secrets incarnate, were the harbingers of her hope. And in that quiet aftermath, as the sun dipped below the horizon over the Stormlands, the queen gazed upon the ravaged hall and whispered to herself an echo of a prayer she once heard in a foreign land. "May we break the wheel of suffering, not by forging new chains, but by setting hearts free to choose their own destiny." Whether the lords of Westeros would ever truly embrace this vision remained to be seen. But the children, once called little birds, were already singing a new song across the realm, one of liberty, second chances, and secrets laid bare for all to see. And Daenerys, stepping away from the ruins with determination in her step, intended to make that song resound through every hall, every alley, every lonely corner of the Seven Kingdoms, until no child ever had to live in fear again. Daenerys Targaryen stood in the husk of Lord Harold Selwick's hall while sunlight slanted through the shattered rafters. Days of battle had reduced this place to smoke-stained rubble. Her victory had been decisive, unavoidable, truly, and yet she felt no triumph as she surveyed the scorched remains of the courtyard. Bodies still needed tending. The wounded still groaned from the makeshift infirmary set up in what had once been a stable. Soldiers under her banner moved through the place with grim efficiency, disposing of the slain, restoring a semblance of order, and ensuring that no stray arrow or blade threatened to rekindle the fighting. Soot and ash painted every visible stone. Where once had been a proud if modest fortress, now stood a ruin, a testament, Daenerys thought, to the folly of resisting change. She inhaled slowly, eyes drifting to Drogon, who crouched amid a collapsed section of the outer wall. He was feeding from the body of a fallen horse, a sight that drew uncomfortable looks from some of the men. But Daenerys let her dragon feast. Drogon had done his part in the battle by striking fear into the hearts of Lord Harold's rebels, ensuring that most surrendered rather than waste their lives. If a small measure of blood was the cost, then so be it. Better that she allow her dragons to remind Westeros they existed, and that they would do far more damage if forced. As she turned, she spied Tyrion Lannister picking his way through the debris, speaking in low tones with Grey Worm. Tyrion's hair, dusty and unkempt, gave him a disheveled look, but his mind would be as sharp as ever. Grey Worm, for his part, wore an expression that rarely shifted from vigilant determination, but Daenerys could see something in his stance, a slight relaxation of the shoulders, indicating relief that the worst of the fighting was over. She remembered that once, after the conquest of Meereen, Grey Worm had confessed relief not just for the victory but for having survived to see it. The same sense of weary gratitude lingered in the air now. Across the courtyard, Missandei and Sonya emerged from a half-toppled doorway. Sonya, the teenage girl who had grown up in the Stormlands under Varys' network, now stood with a posture that belied her youth. She had been entrusted with a daunting task, to help bring peace and stability to this region, ensuring that the local small folk understood Daenerys was not here to be a cruel conqueror, but a queen who cared for their well-being. Beside her, Missandei was gently guiding a pair of wide-eyed peasant children, orphans who had been discovered trembling in a storage room. Perhaps they'd lost their parents in the chaos of the skirmish or to some earlier cruelty. Daenerys had repeatedly found such tragedies in every city she took. This was the world, broken and battered, that she was trying to mend. She moved to join Missandei and Sansa, her boots crunching on fallen shards of masonry. As she approached, the two children shrank back at the sight of her, but Missandei whispered reassurance. Daenerys knelt, ignoring the filth that smeared her cloak, and offered a gentle smile. "You need not fear me," she said quietly. The children, a boy and a girl of about 7 or 8, stared at her silver hair, at the small flecks of blood across her boots. One had a tear-streaked face, the other clutched a ragged cloth doll. Sansa spoke up, her voice soft. "They saw the fighting. Their parents, I think their father served Lord Harold as a guardsman. He was killed in the battle. I'm not sure about their mother." Daenerys felt a hollow pang in her chest. "I am sorry," she said, meeting the children's eyes. She clasped her hands gently, resisting the urge to reach out and startle them. "We will see to your care. You will not go hungry or cold again, I promise you." The boy opened his mouth, but words failed him, and tears welled in his eyes instead. The little girl gripped the doll so tightly her knuckles went white. Daenerys felt the weight of their fear. They were too young to parse the complexities of rebellion, too fragile to see their father's death as anything but raw horror. She wanted to promise them an immediate world of safety and love, but she knew it would take time. Actions, not words, would prove that she meant to protect them. Missandei gave Daenerys a small nod. "We found them hiding in the storehouse. There could be more like them in the area. We'll search thoroughly." Daenerys rose. "Thank you. Bring them and any other displaced children we find to the main camp. The healers will watch over them and will provide food and shelter. Once we establish a caretaker for this region, we can place them under protective guardianship." Sansa's face was set with determination. "I'll see to it," she said. "I know some families in the nearby village who might be willing to foster orphans. They'll have to rebuild, of course, but I can speak with them." Daenerys gave the girl's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "You do that." "Thank you, Sansa." She paused, searching the teenager's eyes. There was weariness there, understandable after so much tension and fear, but also a flicker of pride in her new role. Sansa was forging a new path, no longer a child messenger enslaved by secrets, but a free agent, part of Daenerys' vision for a better realm. Missandei guided the children away, speaking in a gentle tone that Daenerys knew so well. Sansa followed, her footfalls echoing lightly on the broken cobbles. For a moment, Daenerys watched them go, silent. Then she turned and made her way toward Tyrion and Grey Worm, who were standing amidst a cluster of Unsullied. They parted to let her through. Tyrion acknowledged her with a tilt of his head. "We have most of the Sellswords accounted for, Your Grace. Many surrendered outright once our infantry breached the walls, but a handful fled into the countryside. Local peasants have described them as a ragtag group with no real organization. I doubt they pose a significant threat, but they might resort to brigandage if left unchecked." Grey Worm added, "I can dispatch patrols to find them and bring them to justice. Or if you prefer, I'll send word that they may surrender and join the Queen's service. If they do not, we treat them as criminals." Daenerys considered. Memories flickered in her mind. How she had dealt with the Second Sons, the Unsullied themselves, the Golden Company she had faced. Some Sellswords could be persuaded to serve under a just ruler. Others would continue their mercenary ways no matter what. "Offer them a chance at surrender," she said. "If they refuse, we'll treat them as outlaws. I would rather give them an opportunity to lay down arms and serve lawfully than chase them forever through the forests." Grey Worm nodded. "It will be done." He gestured to a waiting group of Unsullied who were organizing for a patrol. Their discipline remained impeccable despite the muddy, uneven ground. They marched off in unison as soon as Grey Worm gave the word. Tyrion exhaled. "Good. A measured approach." "Speaking of measured approaches, do you have any word on exactly how far Harold's network extended?" "We found some letters in his private chambers, half-burnt unfortunately, that mentioned potential allies in the Reach. Another references someone in the Westerlands. Daenerys felt a spike of annoyance at the mention of further conspiracies. I suspected as much. The Storm's gavel seemed too bold to rely solely on local manpower. They must have been negotiating with other lords. Well, we have their seat of power now, and Harold is dead. Let's see how quickly those alliances crumble. Tyrion gave a grim chuckle. Likely they'll scatter like roaches when the torch is lit. Even so, it's wise to keep an ear out. Or an ear to the ground, I should say. If these alliances gain traction in secret, we'll need to know before another rebellion sparks. Daenerys looked toward the sky where Rhaegal was circling slowly, scanning for any threat from above. I'll have Varys cross-reference what you discovered with the children's reports from the Reach and the Westerlands. The sooner we identify the troublemakers, the better. I want no more pointless bloodshed. Tyrion grimaced at the mention of Varys, though it was subtle. The spider's role had changed dramatically now that Daenerys had freed his little birds, transforming his once monolithic network into a sprawling flow of information that anyone could tap into. Varys's cunning remained invaluable, but his hold on that intelligence was diminished. Tyrion himself often mused that Varys was both relieved and unmoored by this shift. Yes, we'll speak with him, Tyrion agreed. I imagine he'll be quite interested to sift through the letters we found. Daenerys was about to speak again when she noticed Ser Davos Seaworth approaching, his gait stiff from the bruises he'd sustained during his brief captivity. He had insisted on staying behind to help quell the last pockets of resistance. Now he stopped before her, offering a respectful half-bow. Your Grace, the courtyard is secure, and we've begun distributing food from the supplies we brought along. The local peasants look half-starved, but they're wary. Some lost kin who fought for Harold. Others were pressed into service. We're doing what we can to tend to them all. She regarded him with warmth. Davos had proven loyal and resourceful, despite everything he had endured under Stannis Baratheon and then the wars that followed. Thank you, Ser Davos. I appreciate your efforts. These people must know we will not abandon them just because their lord chose rebellion. He nodded gravely, folding his arms. Well, let's hope the message gets through. Fear can be a stubborn thing, but feed a hungry family, and fear starts to slip away. Daenerys let the corners of her mouth tilt into a faint smile. Wise as always. Will you stay here a time longer to help oversee that distribution? Davos hesitated, then bowed his head. As you command, Your Grace. I'll see that it's done properly. If you'll permit it, I'd like to ensure that no one is hoarding or taking advantage of the chaos. I recall from my smuggling days how easily desperate folk can be exploited. She inclined her head. Do so. Missandei and Sansa can coordinate with you. I'll leave a detachment of Unsullied and some of our freed children as scouts. Once the region is stable, we'll consider appointing a new castellan. Perhaps a local minor lord with no dark history of cruelty, if we can find one. Tyrion interjected gently. Might I suggest Ser Gilbar Tarth? He's not the head of House Tarth, obviously, but a cousin, if I remember rightly. He's known to be fair-minded, and the Tarth name carries some weight in the Stormlands. He'll likely accept the appointment if it's offered graciously. Daenerys made a mental note. Very well. Invite him to come and swear fealty. If he agrees, he can govern here provisionally until I confirm a permanent lord. They discussed a few more particulars. Farmland restoration, the possibility of Tarth shipping fresh grain if the Red Keep funded the transport, and the distribution of building materials from King's Landing surplus. Step by step, Daenerys saw the outlines of her grand vision. A realm in which the small folk did not suffer for their lord's ambitions. A realm in which rebellious pockets either reformed under her compassionate rule or were stamped out before they did more harm. She kept reminding herself that she had not truly wanted violence here. But in Westeros, force was sometimes the only language men like Harold Selwick understood. When the arrangements were largely set, Daenerys called for her dragons to gather. Rhaegal and Viserion settled on the broken outer rampart, while Drogon half-flapped to perch in the courtyard, sending dust swirling. Some peasants scurried away in terror. Daenerys took a moment to stroke Drogon's great flank, feeling the heat radiating from his scales. He rumbled low in his throat, a sign of pleasure or at least acceptance. She was about to mount him when she noticed Missandei approaching from the side, her expression tinged with concern. "Your Grace," Missandei said softly, "Sonya wishes to speak to you before you depart. She has concerns about being left in authority here." Daenerys exhaled. She'd expected as much. Sonya was young, and this was an immense responsibility. "Send her to me." Moments later, Sonya arrived. She wore plain riding leathers, her hair braided back to keep it out of her face. Dust smudged her cheeks. She bowed her head respectfully. "Your Grace, I'm sorry to trouble you, but Missandei said I could speak." Daenerys offered a gentle smile. "You may always speak your mind. Tell me what concerns you." Sonya hesitated, eyes dipping. "I'm afraid I'm not ready for this. I know these lands, but I'm no lady. My father was a fisherman, my mother a seamstress. They died and I became one of Varys's birds. I don't know how to lead. I can talk to the small folk, yes, but appointing justices, distributing supplies, I worry I'll fail you." Daenerys reached out to tilt Sonya's chin up, meeting her gaze. "You're no longer one of Varys's birds. You're free, and you've proven your courage already, traveling all this way to warn me of Harold's treachery. The people of these lands need someone who understands them, someone who won't prey upon them or hold them in disdain. That's you. Missandei, Ser Davos, and Grey Worm's men will be here to guide you. You won't be alone." Sonya swallowed hard. I want to do right by you, and by them." Daenerys nodded. "I know you do, and that is precisely why you're suited to this. If you were hungry for power, I'd be wary. But you're reluctant, which means you'll take the responsibility seriously. Go forth with humility, listen more than you speak, and show them that you care. You will not fail." For a long moment, Sonya seemed on the verge of tears. Then she inhaled, setting her jaw. "I won't fail. I promise." Daenerys squeezed her arm once in reassurance. "Good. Now do what you must. The region is still fragile. Feed the hungry, keep the peace, and let me know of any further conspiracies." "Yes, Your Grace." With that, Sonya bowed, turned, and left to oversee the next stage of the region's recovery. Daenerys felt a surge of pride in the girl, mingled with sorrow at all she had endured. Sonya was one of countless orphans in this realm, each with a story carved by war and neglect. If Daenerys could ensure that no future child endured the same fate, she would consider her reign worth any struggle. She pulled herself up onto Drogon, who snorted impatiently. Tyrion, who had mounted a stout destrier, waved from the courtyard. "Off we go, Your Grace?" Daenerys nodded. She extended a hand to Missandei, who climbed onto Drogon's back behind her. She preferred to ride a horse usually, but these were uncertain times, and Daenerys wanted her close. Rhaegal and Viserion took to the sky with thunderous wing beats. As they rose above the battered fortress, Daenerys surveyed the land below. Fresh graves being dug, carts bearing food arriving from her supply trains, small groups of soldiers and peasants moving about in a grim dance of recovery. A swirl of dust blurred some details, but the shape of her intent remained clear. With a gentle nudge of her knees, she guided Drogon into the air. Tyrion and a company of knights rode beneath them, heading along the road that would eventually lead back to King's Landing. The flight northward allowed Daenerys a vantage of the Stormlands. The terrain stretched out in swaths of green hills and craggy coastlines, broken by the occasional cluster of huts or farmland. Smoke rose from cooking fires, from blacksmith forges. There were no massive columns of black smoke that might herald another rebellion in progress, just the daily life of a battered region trying to survive. Missandei clung lightly to Daenerys's waist, leaning forward to be heard over the wind. "I believe Sonya will do well once she gains confidence," she said. Daenerys nodded, the wind whipping strands of her silver hair back across Missandei's face. "I hope so. She's lived these lands. She knows these people. That matters more than a name or a title. If any trouble arises, she'll send word." "Yes, Your Grace." Missandei hesitated, We should also consider how this will be perceived by other lords. They might see it as you placing a commoner in a position of authority. It will anger some of them. Daenerys looked down at the rolling hills below. It might, she admitted. But if those lords cannot stomach the idea that a person's worth is not determined by birth, they will find themselves at odds with my reign soon enough. I didn't cross the narrow sea just to recreate the same chains I broke in Essos. Missandei did not disagree. She simply tightened her hold as Drogon soared higher, letting the conversation die on the wind. It took another week for Daenerys' traveling party to return to King's Landing at a measured pace. They paused to visit a few villages that had once sworn to Harold, ensuring the inhabitants had been informed of his defeat and offering them the Queen's protection. At each stop, she saw a similar mixture of relief and anxiety. The small folk feared dragons but also grasped that the presence of Daenerys Targaryen might mean an end to the petty tyrannies of local lords. Some shyly brought forth gifts, baskets of apples, a woven scarf, a handful of meager coins. Daenerys refused most of these tributes, instructing them to use their resources for their own well-being. Still, she accepted a few tokens out of courtesy, knowing how deeply custom ran. In one village, a bent-backed woman pressed a tiny figurine of a dragon made of baked clay into Daenerys' hands, tears in her eyes as she prayed that the queen would keep them safe. Daenerys, deeply touched, placed it carefully in her saddlebag. The journey also gave her a chance to speak with Tyrion at length about the shape of governance. They rode side by side whenever possible, or sometimes conferred in the evenings around campfires. Tyrion, as always, had a mind teeming with ideas. They discussed how to streamline taxes so that the burden on small folk was not crushing, how to encourage trade routes that would rebuild the realm's economy, how to reduce the risk of banditry by employing freed children as traveling messengers, kids who knew the roads, the codes, and who had a vested interest in the Queen's stable rule. The key, Tyrion said one evening, poking at the campfire with a stick, is to ensure that the lords still feel they have a role, but that they can't simply abuse their power. Some measure of autonomy helps keep them invested, but firm oversight from the crown prevents tyranny. It's a delicate balance. Daenerys, leaning on a small log, considered the flicker of flames. The warmth felt good on her face. Balance. I've spent my life smashing systems that relied on exploitation. Now I must create a new system, mindful that not all men will embrace fairness willingly. Some are content to be oppressors if it benefits them. Tyrion shrugged. True enough, but you do have allies among the nobility, some who see the wisdom in your reforms, or at least see the advantage. Tarly in the Reach is loyal enough, though after what happened with his father and brother, well, that's complicated. House Tyrell has effectively collapsed, leaving proxies in place. Dorne remains independent-spirited but seems to lean toward cooperation. The North has sworn fealty, but the Northern lords remain proud as ever. I'd suggest we handle them with a light touch if you want to keep the peace. Daenerys nodded slowly. She had not forgotten the lessons gleaned from the Starks and their allies. The North would always be a world unto itself, requiring nuance and respect. She had no wish to provoke them into another rebellion. Yes, a light touch, she agreed, but also clarity. They are part of the realm and I am their queen. I'll not let them slip away or undermine me in secret. Tyrion smirked, taking a sip from a wineskin. Here's to clarity, then. The next morning, they broke camp before dawn, continuing the route that skirted patches of farmland where the scars of war were still evident. Burned houses, fields left fallow from lack of hands to till them. Daenerys resolved to organize a program of labor relief if possible, sending small teams of skilled farmers from less damaged regions to teach and assist. One of her earliest priorities in Meereen had been the rebuilding of infrastructure, and she saw no reason that such a plan wouldn't work here, albeit with careful attention to Westerosi traditions. At last, the city of King's Landing came into view, sprawling along the Blackwater Rush. The gates bustled with commerce and chaos, as always, though Daenerys noted that the throngs of refugees had diminished. Perhaps word was spreading that the Queen was making progress in stabilizing the realm, or maybe the city simply couldn't accommodate more displaced families. From her vantage on Drogon, gliding overhead, She caught the glimmer of sunlight on the red rooftops, the smoke curling from countless chimneys. Her dragon's shadows rippled over the rooftops, sending a ripple of alarm through some neighborhoods. But overall, it seemed fewer screams rose from the streets these days. The people had grown used to the presence of dragons in the sky, or at least they no longer broke out into mass panic at the sight. She landed in the Red Keep's upper courtyard, which had been reserved for the dragons by her command. Keepers in thick leather approached with caution, offering lumps of meat as a greeting to the beasts. Daenerys dismounted, helping Missandei do the same. Before she could fully gather her thoughts, a cluster of attendants bowed and rushed forward to tend to her immediate needs: water, fresh garments, updates from the city. She waved them off with a polite but firm gesture, wanting first to see how the realm had fared in her absence. She found Varys in the Queen's Solar, standing at a table covered in scrolls. He wore his usual half-smile, though there was an air of pensiveness about him. At the table stood two of the older children who had once been in his network, both of whom had chosen to continue gleaning information for the realm, though now they did so freely as Daenerys had decreed. When Daenerys and Missandei entered, Varys inclined his head in a show of respect. "Your Grace," he said, "I am pleased to see you returned safely from the Stormlands. I trust the rebellion was quelled." Daenerys eyed the parchments on the table. "Yes, Lord Varys. Harold Selwick is dead, his men dispersed or captured. We're cleaning up the remnants, but that threat is finished." She paused. "I hear you've been busy gathering more intelligence?" Varys spread his hands in a gesture of humility. "The flow of information never ceases, Your Grace, especially now that we've removed the old restrictions on my former little birds. They bring scraps of gossip from the Riverlands, the Vale, even across the narrow sea. Quite the tapestry of half-truths and rumors." Daenerys thought of how that tapestry had already saved her from being caught unaware. She came closer, glancing at the scrolls. "Any pressing concerns?" One of the children, a lanky boy of 15, spoke up timidly. "There are letters from Oldtown, Your Grace. Reports that some maesters are uncertain about your changes to the laws. They fear it might cause unrest or, well, they claim it's not in keeping with tradition." Daenerys raised an eyebrow. "Maesters speaking out of turn? They're meant to advise, not govern. Still, I suppose old habits die hard." Varys inclined his head. "Indeed, the Citadel has always been a bastion of conservative thinking. Change unsettles them." Daenerys accepted that with a nod, mentally filing it away. "Anything else?" The other child, a girl with ink-stained fingers, lifted a parchment. "We've heard from a contact in Lannisport. A certain Lord Brax suggests that some of the wealthier Lannister bannermen are uneasy with the new taxes that the crown requires for the capital's reconstruction. He didn't call it rebellion, but it sounds like discontent." Daenerys frowned slightly. "Discontent is understandable, but if they push too far, we could have another herald on our hands." Varys bowed his head. "We'll watch them carefully. For now, it seems they're only complaining, not arming themselves." She nodded. "Very well. Keep me informed." Then she paused, glancing at the children. "Thank you both. You've done good work. I trust Lord Varys sees that you have what you need." They both nodded, and the girl murmured, "Yes, Your Grace. We live in the keep, and we have enough to eat and schooling." Daenerys offered a small, genuine smile. "If you require anything, let Missandei know. That goes for any of the children. You are not servants. You are free to stay or leave as you please." They both bowed clumsily, clearly still awed by their proximity to the Queen. Daenerys noticed a trace of ink on the girl's cheek, the hallmark of someone learning new skills with quill and parchment. Freed from the shadows, the children were gradually discovering that the realm could offer them more than corridors and corners. It gave her hope that she was, in small ways, making a lasting difference. The children departed, leaving Daenerys, Missandei, and Varys alone. Daenerys looked at the Master of Whisperers, though that title felt almost antiquated now that his network was shared so broadly. "So, is there anything else of consequence?" Varys folded his hands. "There is one matter, Your Grace. a rumor from Bravos. The Iron Bank may be displeased that your rule hasn't restored the crown's debts as quickly as they hoped. They've sent an emissary to King's Landing, a man named Glaris Tavel, who arrived just 2 days ago. He's asked for an audience with you. Daenerys repressed a sigh. The Iron Bank had loomed in the background ever since she took the throne. She knew full well how they could topple monarchs by funding their enemies, though she also knew they responded to power. Where is he now? Varys gave a measured shrug. I placed him in guest quarters, suitably comfortable but not lavish. He has been awaiting your return, though I suspect he grows impatient. In my experience, the Iron Bank's representatives are rarely fond of delays. Daenerys turned to Missandei. Have you spoken with him? Missandei shook her head. Not yet, Your Grace. He arrived unexpectedly, and I thought it best to wait for you. He bears a letter of credence from the bank's keyholders. Daenerys's mind started turning over the possible reasons for this visit. To demand repayment, to threaten to fund her enemies if she did not comply, or perhaps to make another arrangement. The Iron Bank always hedged its bets. Very well, I'll see him on the morrow. In the meantime, have Tyrion gather whatever documents we have on the crown's finances. I'll not be caught off guard. Varys bowed. As you wish. I'll make the arrangements. He withdrew, leaving Daenerys with Missandei in the solar. The warm light of late afternoon spilled through the high windows, illuminating motes of dust in the air. Daenerys smoothed a hand over the table's surface, feeling the worn grooves. She felt the weight of her station pressing heavily, as it often did, but she steeled herself. This was part of ruling, negotiating with bankers, addressing the concerns of the maesters, warding off rebellious lords. She had long dreamed of the Iron Throne. Only now did she fully grasp that ankh. You seized it, the real battle for peace and prosperity began. Missandei, she said quietly, summon me a bath. I need to wash off the dust of the road and the memory of the Stormlands. Missandei inclined her head. Certainly, Your Grace, and I'll have fresh garments prepared. Daenerys nodded, watching her friend depart to carry out the request. As she stood alone in the solar, she let her eyes drift across the maps pinned to the walls, Westeros in all its fractious glory. She traced her fingertips along the shape of the continent. Once, this had seemed a fabled land from across the sea. Now it was her burden, her destiny, her responsibility. One realm, but so many stories, so many lives. She closed her eyes, letting a wave of determination wash over her. She had not crossed oceans, broken chains, and survived betrayal to fail now. Whatever storms might come, from the Iron Bank, from discontented lords, from old traditions, she would face them with the same resolve that had carried her through so many trials before. Early the next morning, Daenerys emerged from her private chambers wearing a gown of deep blue that highlighted her silver hair. She felt restored by a long soak in hot water and a night's rest in a real bed. As she made her way toward the throne room, she could feel the pulse of the red keep around her. Guards snapping to attention, servants bustling with trays of bread and fruit, a pair of unsullied carrying fresh supplies to the kitchens. The keep had evolved under her rule, filling with people from many backgrounds. Freed children, refugees from the war, Dothraki sworn to her service, and more. It was a melange that would have scandalized many a traditional lord, but Daenerys felt it breathed new life into these old stones. When she reached the throne room, she found Tyrion already waiting with a sheaf of parchments tucked under his arm. A few knights stood at attention near the base of the Iron Throne, which loomed as always, a forbidding mass of twisted blades. Daenerys approached Tyrion, who offered a slight bow. Your Grace, he said, the Iron Bank's envoy awaits. I've reviewed the ledgers. We've made headway on the debt, but not as much as they might like. Rebuilding the city and feeding refugees has cost a considerable sum. Daenerys nodded gravely. I will not apologize for that. If the Iron Bank cannot see the benefits of a stable realm in the long term, then we'll have to make them see. Tyrion gave a thin smile. A stable realm will ultimately pay its debts, or so we can argue. Let us see how flexible they are. A herald announced the arrival of Glaris Tavel of the Iron Bank of Bravos. The man entered, clad in dark robes of fine silk, a trim beard graying at the edges. He advanced at a measured pace, carefully observing the tapestries, the guards, and Daenerys herself. When he reached the foot of the dais leading to the Iron Throne, he bowed low. "Your Grace," he said in a voice that was neither overly deferential nor haughty, "I bring greetings from the keyholders of the Iron Bank. I trust you are in good health." Daenerys regarded him evenly, seated upon the throne. It was still somewhat disconcerting to feel the cold metal against her back, to recall how many had fought and died for this seat. Yet she kept her composure, letting her voice carry a note of polite formality. "I am, and I appreciate your prompt arrival, though your presence was somewhat unexpected." He straightened, placing his hands together. "The bank seeks stability in all its dealings, Your Grace. We have observed the turmoil that consumed Westeros for years. The War of the Five Kings, the troubles under Queen Cersei, then your own rightful war to claim the throne. Now that the dust settles, we hope to reaffirm the Crown's financial obligations to the Iron Bank." Tyrion stepped forward slightly. "Indeed, about those obligations, the Queen has begun repaying a portion of the debt. However, the costs of reconstruction are considerable, as is the cost of maintaining peace. Surely the Iron Bank prefers a realm that can pay steadily over time, rather than one plunged back into conflict by demanding sums we cannot immediately spare." Glarus turned his calculating gaze on Tyrion. "Ah, Lord Tyrion, I see you remain the Queen's hand. Yes, we do appreciate stability, but the bank is also pragmatic. Delayed payments expose us to risk, especially if new rebellions disrupt the Crown's finances." Daenerys' tone was calm but firm. "Westeros is large, and it suffered under the previous regime. I will not starve my people or crush them with taxes just to satisfy the Iron Bank's accelerated timetable. If Braavos invests in me, invests in the peace I'm building, they'll see the rewards soon enough." Glarus clasped his hands. "The bank has never hesitated to invest, Your Grace, but we must ensure our investments remain sound. We have heard rumors of discontent in certain regions, Stormlands, the Westerlands, the Reach. If these discontents flare up, will that not hinder your ability to repay?" Daenerys' eyes narrowed. She realized he was seeking to leverage the rumors of rebellion to exact some concession. "I assure you, rebellious elements will be dealt with swiftly. We prefer peace, but if forced, we can crush any who oppose the Crown's authority. You may inform your keyholders that the Iron Throne remains secure." "Very reassuring," Glarus said, though his tone was non-committal. "Perhaps there is a way to satisfy both parties. If the Iron Bank were granted certain privileges in Westeros, expanded access to trade routes, reduced tariffs on goods through certain ports, we could consider adjusting the repayment schedule. The bank is always open to mutually beneficial arrangements." Tyrion exchanged a look with Daenerys. This was the real crux. The bank wanted commercial concessions. Daenerys' mind churned. Granting the Iron Bank favored trade status could undercut local merchants or cause friction with other financial partners. But refusing altogether might alienate Braavos and drive them to fund her enemies. A delicate balance, indeed. She let a thoughtful silence hang in the air. Then she leaned forward on the throne. "It is not unreasonable that Braavos would wish to expand trade. However, I must also protect the interests of my realm. Reduce tariffs, yes, but only for a set period, say 5 years, after which we will review and negotiate new terms. And in exchange, the bank will not only extend our repayment schedule, but also provide a loan at a modest interest rate to support the reconstruction efforts." Glarus' eyebrows rose a fraction. "A new loan, Your Grace?" Tyrion stepped in. "Yes, consider it an investment in peace. The Crown can rebuild faster, restore stable commerce, and thus increase tax revenue from a realm no longer plagued by chaos. The Iron Bank gets repaid with interest and enjoys a prime position in future trade agreements." Glarus' eyes flickered with the quick mental math so characteristic of bankers. "I would need to communicate with the keyholders. But if you can put these terms in writing, we may consider them. Provided the interest rate is acceptable to the bank, of course." Daenerys fixed him with a level gaze. "We'll craft the details. You will find them fair. She deliberately did not say generous. She had no intention of being overly generous to an institution that would hang her out to dry if they deemed it necessary. Glarus offered a polished bow. Very well, Your Grace. I look forward to reviewing the proposal. Is there anything else you require of me at present? She shook her head. No. Tyrion will draft the preliminary terms. You'll remain our guest until we reach an agreement. You have my word that you'll be treated courteously. He bowed again. My thanks, Your Grace. With that, he turned and departed, flanked by a pair of guards who showed him out. Daenerys exhaled, leaning back against the throne's high spines. She glanced at Tyrion. Does it never end? He smirked. Not while you rule, but you handled him well. He wanted to squeeze us for a quick repayment, and instead, he's walking away considering how to accommodate your terms. You outmaneuvered him. She let out a humorless chuckle. Perhaps, but we've only just begun these negotiations. The Iron Bank can be tenacious. She shifted her shoulders against the steel seat. I will not let them run roughshod over Westeros. We'll find a path that strengthens both sides. Tyrion bowed. I'll begin drafting the terms, if you wish. She nodded. Do so. Have Missandei and one of your best scribes help. I trust your judgment on the finer financial details, so long as we don't compromise our sovereignty. He departed, and Daenerys took a moment to gaze over the throne room. There were fewer courtiers here than in days past. Some of the great houses had lost so many heirs in the wars that entire seats stood vacant. Others, like the Tullus in the Riverlands or the Arryns in the Vale, were still reorganizing after the chaos. She pictured the painted table she had once studied in Dragonstone, with the shape of Westeros carved into its surface. Conquest was always simpler on a map, neat lines drawn between territories. Ruling, by contrast, was 1,000 overlapping webs of alliances, finances, personal loyalties, old vendettas, new ambitions. Daenerys reminded herself that she had vowed to break the wheel. That meant building a new structure from the ground up, not letting herself be bound by old constraints. If the Iron Bank or any other power tried to corner her with demands, she would find a third path, a better path. She rose from the throne and strode across the echoing floor of the hall. Guards snapped to attention as she passed. She paused briefly to speak with Ser Brienne of Tarth, who had recently come south to pledge her sword. Brienne offered news of the north, having traveled through it on her way to the capital. Daenerys listened attentively. The northern lords, it seemed, were anxious about rumored unrest in the area near the Dreadfort, the old seat of House Bolton. Apparently, a minor clan claimed partial inheritance, stirring trouble. Daenerys instructed Brienne to keep her apprised, then continued on. Exiting into the corridor, she found the castle humming with midday business. The smell of baking bread drifted from the kitchens, mixing with the tang of fresh paint from some ongoing repairs. She nodded to the unsullied posted outside her solar, then stepped inside for some relative quiet. A few moments of solitude were all she could spare these days, but even that was a small respite. She poured herself a cup of chilled water from a decanter, sipped it slowly, and let her mind wander over the tasks that lay ahead. A soft knock sounded at the door. She set down the cup and called, "Enter." The door swung open to reveal an older woman with lines of care etched into her face. Ilyana, one of the scribes who had joined Daenerys' court after working for years under Cersei's regime. Ilyana had proven loyal, if somewhat timid. She clutched a roll of parchment, bowing awkwardly. "Forgive me, Your Grace," she murmured. "Lord Varys said you might wish to see this. It's a missive from the Citadel in Old Town, addressed to the crown." Daenerys motioned her forward. "Let me see." Ilyana approached, holding out the parchment. Daenerys broke the wax seal and scanned the contents. As the words unfolded, her expression darkened slightly. "Humph," she said under her breath. "Is it troubling, Your Grace?" Ilyana ventured, keeping her gaze down. Daenerys pursed her lips. "They've heard about my plan to place some of the freed children into local positions, messengers, scribes, record keepers. The Archmasters expressed concern that untrained youths could spread misinformation or disrupt the established flow of knowledge. They politely suggest that I let the Citadel handle all matters of record-keeping and intelligence. Ilyana remained quiet, carefully neutral in her posture. Daenerys handed the letter back to her. "Thank you for bringing this to me. You may go." Ilyana bowed and slipped out. Daenerys stared at the closed door. The established flow of knowledge indeed. She had no quarrel with the Citadel's store of learning, but the Archmasters had always wielded an outsized influence over the realm's scholarship and communications. They controlled the ravens, the education of new maesters, and much of the recorded history. No wonder they felt uneasy about the Queen introducing a new system of gleaning and distributing information. Yet she would not yield. Varys's network, now set free, had proven its worth in halting rebellions and ensuring she ruled with open eyes. The maesters were welcome to advise and share knowledge, but they did not have a monopoly on truth. And so, once again, Daenerys found herself at a crossroads with the old ways. She could attempt to appease the Citadel, letting them maintain exclusive control of record-keeping and official communication. Or she could remain steadfast in her intention to foster a new generation of scribes, drawn from orphans and common folk, ensuring no single institution could bottleneck the realm's knowledge. The choice to her was clear. For a moment, she recalled the moment she had freed the Unsullied in Astapor. The slavers had been so certain of their authority that they never considered the possibility of a different path. Then she recalled the moment she had tossed aside the tyranny of the Dothraki Khals, literally burning their temple to the ground. Each time, she had faced the old order and made them see a new truth. Westeros was no different. She would not kneel to the Archmasters simply because they wore chains of metal around their necks. If they chose to stand beside her, well and good. If not, she would move forward regardless. She resolved to pen a measured yet firm response, affirming that she valued the Citadel's wisdom but would not relinquish her own initiatives to train these new scribes. She considered sending a personal envoy, perhaps Samwell Tarly, if he could be persuaded, for he had once studied there. But he was deep in the north at present, helping Jon Snow oversee certain matters. Another time, perhaps, a tap came at the door again, and this time it was Missandei who entered. She carried a small pile of letters and wore an expression of quiet determination. Daenerys gestured for her to set them on the table. "Your Grace," Missandei said. "These came by Raven this morning. News from Dorne, the Vale, and also from the Iron Islands." Daenerys's brow arched. "The Iron Islands? What do they want?" Missandei handed her the letter. "It's from Yara Greyjoy. She suggests a meeting to formalize the Iron Islands' role in the realm. She says some of her captains are growing restless, uncertain if their queen truly supports your reign, or if they should set their sails independently." Daenerys read the letter. Yara was curt but polite enough, explaining that the Ironborn needed clarity on their freedoms under the Targaryen queen. They feared heavy-handed restrictions on their raiding traditions, though Yara herself had pledged to break with the old ways. The letter ended with a request. "Let us meet and come to terms that preserve both your sovereignty and our sense of identity." Daenerys sighed. They can't quite shake that yearning for the old way, reaving and paying the iron price. But Yara at least tries to guide them toward a new path. I appreciate her wanting to formalize it. She placed the letter aside. "Send word that I agree to a meeting. We can hold it at Dragonstone, perhaps, or here in King's Landing, whichever is more suitable for them." I suspect they'd prefer Dragonstone, as it's closer to the sea. Missandei nodded. "Yes, Your Grace. I'll draft a reply." Daenerys rubbed her temples. Another negotiation, another corner of Westeros seeking clarity. But at least Yara was open to reason. She remembered how Yara and Theon had once approached her in Meereen, pledging ships if Daenerys would support Yara's claim to the Iron Islands. Much had happened since, but the spirit of that alliance remained. She would not let it wither. She picked up the next letter. The Vale. Lord Robert Arryn, through his regent, Lord Royce, expressed nominal support for the Targaryen regime, but insisted on maintaining the Vale's internal autonomy. They sought lower taxes and favorable trade routes to King's Landing, pointing out that their region had largely avoided ruin and thus still possessed resources the crown might need. Daenerys recognized it as a subtle attempt at leverage. Well, so be it. She would see if a bargain could be struck that served both parties. And so it went. The day stretched on as Daenerys navigated a labyrinth of letters, demands, and proposals. Between documents, she paused to reflect on how many times she had envisioned sitting in the Red Keep, commanding the might of the realm. In her imagination, it had always involved simpler decisions. Root out the unworthy, reward the loyal, and shape a new world without compromise. But reality was a swirl of nuance. Each choice, each concession had repercussions. Yet she refused to be paralyzed by complexity. She would move forward, step by step, forging a realm that honored the weak and put an end to tyranny. Even if that meant treaties, trade agreements, pacts with bankers, and delicate alliances with houses shaped by centuries of proud tradition. That evening, after a modest supper in her solar, she often ate lightly, too preoccupied with the demands of rule. Daenerys summoned her dragons to the courtyard for exercise. She rode Drogon beyond the city walls, letting him stretch his wings, while Regal and Viserion cavorted in the sky. The citizens of King's Landing, from the vantage of the fields, saw the shapes of dragons outlined against the setting sun. Some cowered, some stared in awe, and others carried on with their tasks, having grown accustomed to the spectacle. She soared over the rolling plains near the Rose Road, recalling how the field below had once been the site of a major clash with the Lannisters. Fire had seared the earth then, but new grass now grew as it always did. Life renewed itself even after the darkest conflagration. Daenerys had to believe the same would be true of the Seven Kingdoms. She guided Drogon in a wide arc, savoring the rush of wind, the primal sense of freedom that flight always brought her. Above all else, that reminder of freedom was precious. She had given freedom to slaves, to orphans, to entire cities. In moments like this, she felt that same release from the shackles of the ground. Circling back, she alighted in the Red Keep's courtyard. Servants and attendants scattered at the impact of Drogon's landing. He snorted, smoke curling from his nostrils, and folded his wings. Daenerys slid down, patting his flank. For all the negotiations and politics, she was still the mother of dragons. That primal bond would forever set her apart from other monarchs. Let the maesters worry. Let the Iron Bank posture. She had power that transcended mortal schemes. She found Grey Worm waiting, hand on the hilt of his spear. "Your Grace," he said, "I have a report from the patrols in the Stormlands." She raised an eyebrow, dismounting fully. "Tell me." "The Sellswords who fled Herald's Hall have been apprehended, most of them. A few resisted, but we captured them alive. They're being brought to the city for judgment." She nodded curtly. "Good. We'll see if any choose to bend the knee and renounce their mercenary ways. Those who refuse can face the consequences of law." He dipped his head. "And some news from Sonya. She says the distribution F supplies is going well, though there are still pockets of resentment. She asked for more permanent soldiers to keep watch, but not an overwhelming number." Daenerys considered. "Send them. The region needs stability, but not an occupation. A small but effective force." "Thank you, Grey Worm." He acknowledged that with a slight bow, then moved off to organize the men. Daenerys stood in the courtyard, letting the last rays of the sun warm her face. She thought of Sonya again, hoping the girl was managing. Despite her anxieties, Sonya had a keen mind and a genuine empathy for the people of the Stormlands. Over time, with Missandei and Davos' support, she would grow into her role. Daenerys felt a twinge of pride that she was able to entrust such responsibilities to someone who had once been a child of shadows. That was the essence of this new realm she sought to build. Night soon draped the keep in darkness. Daenerys returned to her chambers, lighting a single candle. She removed her dragon-adorned clasps and let her hair fall loose, massaging her temples. She was tired to her very bones, but there was a sense of fulfillment, too, the knowledge that each day she moved the realm a step closer to a fairer future. The path was thorny, but the direction was clear. She settled at a small desk by the window, where a gentle breeze stirred the curtain. Outside, she could hear the distant murmur of the city. People in taverns, lovers walking the moonlit streets, children laughing in the squares. Once, that laughter might have been replaced by the crack of whips or the screams of the oppressed. Now, even if the realm was not yet perfect, it was undeniably changed. She took a fresh parchment and dipped a quill in ink, writing a personal message to Sonya. My young friend, I hope the Stormlands treat you kindly now that the clouds of war have passed. Do not be afraid to seek advice from Ser Davos or Missandei. Remember that I trust you because you have lived as they lived. Show them compassion, and they will come to trust your guidance. I send additional soldiers for your protection, but I hope you will not need them often. I await your next report. With a flourish, she signed it, Daenerys Stormborn, Queen of the Undulls and the First Men, Breaker of Chains, Mother of Dragons. She placed it aside to be sent by Raven in the morning. Next, she drafted a brief reply to the Archmasters of Old Town, politely but firmly stating her position on training new scribes and watchers among the freed children. She affirmed that she valued the Citadel's wisdom yet would not yield the realm's entire flow of information to their exclusive domain. She requested a meeting in the future to discuss cooperation. Then she signed it, sealed it, and set it aside. Finally, she wrote a personal note to Yara Greyjoy, inviting her to Dragonstone for talks about the Iron Island's place under the crown. Daenerys recalled their earlier alliance, the boldness in Yara's eyes when she spoke of freeing the Iron Islands from the old ways of pillage and rapine. Perhaps it was time to see if that boldness had truly taken root. After she set down the quill, her hand cramped. She blew softly on the ink to let it dry. A wave of exhaustion tugged at her. The tasks were endless, but she could rest a little easier knowing she had made progress on so many fronts. She extinguished the candle and moved to her bed, where the softness of sheets felt like a luxury after the rigors of the road. She lay awake, gazing at the moonlight that filtered through the window. Her thoughts drifted to the children who now slept in the keep, the ones freed from Varys's old web of secrets, forging a new path as scribes, scouts, pages, or simply children at last. She wondered how many had nightmares of their old lives, living in shadows. She vowed to help them find better dreams in time. Her mind also wandered to the far reaches of the realm. The Stormlands, the Reach, the North, the Iron Islands, Dorne, the Vale, the Westerlands. So many scattered puzzle pieces that she needed to fit together if she truly meant to unite Westeros. It was a daunting task, especially for a queen who had once known only exile and the uncertain love of a brother who sold her for a crown. But she had her dragons, her allies, her own unwavering spirit. She had the convictions that had led her to break chains in Essos. She would break them here, too, no matter how tangled or ancient they were. Gradually, weariness overcame her thoughts. She let her eyes drift shut, breathing in the night's hush. In her dreams, she saw the sprawl of the Seven Kingdoms from above, as if flying on Drogon's back. She saw fields turning green again, rivers running clear, children laughing in castle yards free of fear. She saw a future not marred by endless war, but by possibility, where knowledge was shared, not hoarded, where even the least of society could rise to positions of respect. She knew it would not come easily, but she also knew she had traveled too far and paid too great a price to settle for anything less. In the days, weeks, and months to come, Daenerys Targaryen would be tested by forces both expected and unforeseen. The stubborn lords of Westeros, the silent machinations of foreign bankers, the ancient institutions that clung to their power, and the ever-present threat of those who whispered of a Targaryen restoration only so long as it served their own ends. But she would continue as she had done, one step at a time, forging alliances, dispensing justice, and trusting in the freed children's network to keep her realm's veins open with truth instead of lies. And the realm, though steeped in centuries of tradition and bloodshed, would shift bit by bit. From the Stormlands to the north, from the western hills to the eastern shores, the name of Daenerys Targaryen would be spoken not only with fear of dragonfire, but with hope for renewal. For it was she who had shown mercy to children once kept in darkness, she who had balanced might with compassion, and she who vowed to break the wheel that had crushed so many underfoot. Thus, the story continued. No triumphant end, no single battle to end all battles, but a slow and painstaking forging of a future. Where once the cunning of Varys's birds had operated in secrecy for the benefit of a chosen few, now their voices sang across the land, sharing tidings of injustice, forging connections. Daenerys listened, learned, and acted, proving day by day that a queen's greatest power was not fear, but the loyalty of those who believed in her cause. And so the realm's secrets became the realm's strength, a tapestry of many hands weaving a new chapter in Westeros's long and turbulent history. Even as challenges loomed, Daenerys found herself smiling in her slumber, a slight curve of the lips in the darkness, as if in anticipation of the dawn. She knew she would wake with renewed resolve to champion the people, noble or common, child or elder, until the day came when no more little birds needed to live in shadows, and the realm could stand on its own, unshackled and unafraid.